I drove 3 hours through Connecticut rain to attend my father's retirement dinner. That was the only reason. 3 decades of practicing medicine in the same small town earned him a celebration, and I intended to sit somewhere near the back, raise a glass when they asked, and leave before dessert. Then my stepmother leaned across the table at the rehearsal lunch and said it loud enough for the caterer to hear. She couldn't even finish medical school. Dropped out her second year. And my father, the man whose name was printed on the invitation in gold foil, said nothing. He adjusted his napkin and reached for the breadbasket like the sentence hadn't landed 3 inches from my chest. Fairhaven is the kind of town where people mow their lawns on a schedule and judge you by the length of your driveway. I hadn't been back in 4 years. The streets looked the same brick storefronts, white church steeple, maple trees arching over sidewalks like they were trying to hold the town together. The pharmacy still had a bell on the door. The diner still smelled like burnt coffee and reliability. I stopped there first because I needed a minute before pulling into my father's driveway. A woman behind the register studied me over her glasses. "Margaret? No. Claire? No. Oh, you're Dr. Whitfield's girl. The other one. The one who left. Just passing through," I said. She nodded like that confirmed something she already believed. "Your daddy's big night tomorrow. Whole town's going." I paid for the coffee and didn't finish it. My father's house sat on a hill at the end of Birch Lane, white clapboard, black shutters, American flag hanging motionless in the wet air. The garden was immaculate. That was Diane's doing. My stepmother treated landscaping the way she treated everything else, as performance. Every hydrangea bloom was a statement. Every trimmed hedge said, "I belong here more than you." She opened the door before I knocked. Arms folded, smile preloaded. "Rachel." She stretched my name like taffy. "Well, you actually came." "Hi, Diane." Her eyes swept me head to toe jeans, white blouse, flats. She tilted her head the way people do when they're pretending concern. "Oh, honey, you're not wearing that tomorrow, are you? I just got off the road." She sighed. "Tomorrow night matters, Rachel. The hospital board, the mayor, Dr. Langford, from Hartford General. Your father wants it perfect." There it was. His reputation held out like a velvet rope I wasn't allowed past. "I'm not here to cause problems," I said. She stepped closer, lowering her voice into that specific register she reserved for maximum damage, soft enough to deny, sharp enough to cut. "Your father's been anxious about this for months," she said. "He doesn't need complications." I set my bag on the hallway floor. "I'm not a complication." She smiled the way a cat smiles at a bird it's already caught. Then her voice dropped further. "I heard you're between jobs again." I didn't answer. She took my silence and tailored it into whatever fit her narrative. "Such a shame," she continued, touching the banister like it needed comforting. "Your father built something real here. 30 years. Patients who trust him. A practice that means something. And you had that chance too." She paused, savoring it. "But some people aren't built for the pressure, I suppose." The old version of me would have corrected her on the spot. The current version understood something more useful. People who manufacture stories eventually stand too close to the truth and get burned by it. I don't need to light the match. I just need to show up. I walked past her into the kitchen. My father stood at the island, reviewing seating charts. Silver at his temples now. Same broad shoulders, same careful posture, the posture of a man who spent decades being the smartest person in every room and never quite knowing what to do with his daughter. He looked up. "Rachel." "Hi, Dad." "You made it," he said, like he wasn't sure that was a good or bad thing. "How was the drive?" "Long." His eyes drifted past me toward Diane, who had materialized in the doorway with the gravitational pull she always seemed to exert over his attention. She gave him a look the kind married couples exchange when they've agreed on a story and someone is threatening to go off script. "We're on a tight schedule," Diane announced. "The country club needs final numbers by 4. My father nodded and returned to his papers. "You're coming tomorrow?" he asked, without looking up. "That's why I'm here." His jaw tightened, something forming behind his teeth, something he swallowed instead. My father was never cruel. He was simply a man who had chosen comfort over confrontation so many times that the path had worn into a groove he couldn't climb out of. Diane knew where the groove led. She maintained it. "Good," Diane said brightly. "You can sit with the Hendersons. Table 9, near the back." "Near the back." Of course. I went upstairs to the guest room. Same floral bedspread, same view of the yard. I set my bag on the chair and stood at the window. A cardinal sat on the fence post, absurdly red against the gray sky. My phone buzzed, a message I read, replied to, and deleted. Not secrecy, just compartmentalization. Some parts of my life didn't belong in this house because this house had never made room for them. That evening, Diane held court at dinner. She talked about the seating chart, the floral arrangements, the speech she'd helped my father write. She talked about the hospital's new wing and how the naming ceremony would follow the retirement dinner. She talked about Dr. Langford's attendance like it was a papal visit. And she talked about me. Rachel's been doing some temp work, she told my father across the pot roast, as though I weren't sitting right there. Nothing permanent. But that's fine. Not everyone's meant for medicine. My father chewed slowly. He didn't correct her. Didn't ask me directly. The groove. I work in Boston, I said. Diane waved her hand. Yes, well, Boston has all sorts of opportunities, even outside the medical field. The implication hung there that whatever I was doing, it was lesser, smaller, not worthy of the Whitfield name that hung on a brass plaque in the hospital lobby. My father looked at me briefly. Something flickered curiosity. Maybe guilt, then it was gone. More pot roast. After dinner, Diane cornered me in the hallway while my father was on the phone with a colleague. Listen, she said, dropping the performance. Tomorrow night is important. Don't wear anything that draws attention. No pins, no badges, nothing medical. It'll confuse people. Confuse them, or contradict the story she'd spent 4 years telling. I understand, I said. She waited for resistance. When none came, suspicion crept into her eyes. But she had no evidence to work with, so she smoothed her blouse and walked away. I stood in that hallway for a long time. The grandfather clock ticked. Photographs lined the wall, my father shaking hands with the governor, my father at a medical conference, my father and Diane at some gala. There was one photo of me, taken when I was 17, braces and a high school lab coat. It hung near the bathroom, where guests would see it only if they were looking for towels. I didn't touch it. I didn't need to. The Fairhaven Country Club was the kind of place that believed in cloth napkins and quiet superiority. Crystal chandeliers, dark wood paneling, oil paintings of founders nobody remembered. By the time we arrived, the parking lot was half full. BMWs, Lexuses, one conspicuous Tesla that probably belonged to the hospital's chief financial officer. Diane emerged from the car like she was stepping onto a red carpet. She wore emerald green, statement earrings, perfume that arrived before she did. Remember, she murmured to me as we crossed the gravel. Tonight is about your father. I know. She gave me a look that said my agreement was somehow threatening. Inside, the room was arranged in careful hierarchies. Round tables with numbered cards, a podium draped in the hospital's colors, a projection screen showing a slideshow of my father's career, or photos, ribbon cuttings, handshakes with politicians. 30 years compressed into a loop that recycled every 4 minutes. A young hospital administrator greeted us at the entrance. Dr. Whitfield. Mrs. Whitfield. Table 1, of course. And she glanced at me. You must be family? Diane answered before I could. This is Rachel, Thomas's daughter. She's visiting from where is it again, Rachel? Boston. Boston, I confirmed. The administrator smiled politely and directed me toward table 9. I didn't argue. Table 9 was near the service entrance. From there, I could see the room without being part of it. Training, habit, preference. My father moved through the crowd like a man stepping into warm water. Handshakes, back slaps, the easy laughter of a physician who had delivered half the town's children and patched up the other half. He looked 10 years younger under admiration. Diane stayed close, hand on his elbow, smile calibrated, every gesture communicating ownership. She introduced herself to every cluster as though they didn't already know. I'm Diane, Thomas's wife. We're just so thrilled about tonight. From table 9, I watched. The Hendersons arrived, a retired dentist and his wife, kind but dull. They smiled at me with practiced sympathy. How are you, dear? What are you doing these days? I work in Boston, I said. Same answer, same polite nod, same unasked follow-up. A woman I half recognized leaned toward her husband 2 tables over. That's his daughter, the one who dropped out. Her husband shook his head. Shame. Thomas must have been devastated. The words floated past me like weather. I had learned to let weather pass. The evening began with ceremony. A hospital board member welcomed guests. The mayor offered remarks about community and legacy. A nursing supervisor read a letter from a former patient whose life my father had saved 22 years ago. It was genuine. I felt proud of him. That hadn't changed. Pride and hurt can coexist. They just take turns speaking. Diane watched the proceedings like a director watching her play, scanning for missed cues, loose threads. Twice, she adjusted the flower arrangement at table 1. Once she whispered something to the MC that made him shuffle his notes. I remained at table 9, invisible, until Diane decided I shouldn't be. She appeared at my elbow during the salad course, carrying a basket of dinner rolls. "Rachel," she said sweetly, "we're short-staffed tonight. The catering company sent one less server. Would you mind?" She held the basket toward me. Warm bread, white linen napkin folded around it. A simple request engineered as public reduction. She leaned closer. "If you're not going to network," she whispered, "you might as well contribute." Revenge stories love the dramatic refusal. The standing ovation moment. Real life is rarely that clean. "Of course," I said. I took the basket. Her satisfaction was immediate. "Good girl," she replied, and walked back toward table 1. I moved through the room offering bread. Most people took a roll without looking at me. A few recognized my face. "Oh, Rachel, thank you, honey. How sweet of you to help." One elderly doctor patted my arm. "Your father raised a good kid." I smiled and moved to the next table. Across the room, my father was deep in conversation with the hospital's chief of staff. He laughed at something that easy. Public laugh that had always come more naturally to him than private honesty. I wondered if he'd noticed I was serving bread at his retirement dinner. I wondered if he'd care. Halfway through the main course, the MC returned to the podium. He cleared his throat and adjusted the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, before we continue with tonight's program, I'm pleased to announce that we have a very special guest joining us this evening." The main doors opened. Heads turned. Conversations paused mid-syllable. The woman who entered wasn't from Fairhaven. That much was immediately clear. The posture alone absolute, practiced, the kind that comes from decades of rooms where precision matters more than comfort. Gray hair cropped short, navy blue suit, understated but immaculate. A small pin on her lapel that most civilians wouldn't recognize, but every physician in the room did. Diane's eyes widened, then sharpened. New variable. She straightened in her chair, smile recalibrating. "Please welcome," the MC continued, his voice carrying a note of genuine reverence, "Dr. Catherine Moreau, Surgeon General of the United States." The room erupted in murmurs. Chairs shifted. My father's face went through 3 expressions in 2 seconds: surprise, pride, nervous excitement. The Surgeon General at his retirement dinner. The ultimate validation. Dr. Moreau walked down the center aisle, shaking hands as she went. Measured, gracious, unhurried. Diane was already on her feet, smoothing her dress, preparing to intercept. She touched my father's arm, whispered something that probably sounded like, "Isn't this wonderful?" But halfway across the room, Dr. Moreau's trajectory shifted. Not toward the podium, not toward table 1, not toward my father, toward table 9. I was still standing near the dessert station, basket in hand, a dinner roll balanced absurdly on the linen. For a moment, I considered that she was heading for the restroom, that this was coincidence. Then I saw her eyes, locked on mine, certain. I set the basket down, straightened, shoulders back, hands at my sides. Dr. Moreau stopped 3 feet from me, and then she did something that broke the room in half. She extended her hand and smiled, not the political smile she'd worn walking in, but something warmer, real, colleague to colleague. "Dr. Whitfield," she said, voice carrying clearly through the stunned silence. "I was hoping you'd be here tonight." The name, my professional name landed like a detonation. Behind her, someone's wine glass clinked against a plate. The sound was enormous in the quiet. Dr. Moreau continued, still holding my hand. "I read your paper on emergency vascular reconstruction last month. Frankly, it should be required reading in every trauma fellowship in the country." She released my hand and turned slightly, addressing the room with the casual authority of someone accustomed